Welcome, and this is the section 2 lecture of chapter 40, and this is the lecture on cross-cultural exchanges and global communications. Um, this is one chapter that is going to be ever changing, so from what you read in your book to what you're experiencing now, there might have been already a lot of changes. There might be changes if you're listening to this in a few years from when I'm recording it, uh, because the world is rapidly changing, including what's in this section, which are the cross-cultural exchanges. So an overview of the section: at the end of the Cold War, political borders open up. The world had been divided between the communist bloc and the capitalist world, but when the Cold War ends in the early 1990s, all of a sudden the world is a lot more open for interaction and exchanging of culture, of ideas with each other. Television is going to play a big role in spreading the ideas and in spreading news of what's happening in the world. Goods of capitalist societies, because remember, the communist societies collapsed, so the goods of the capitalist societies are now desired in these newly free countries. And cultural practices have since become globalized. And that's led to some changing of values, cultural views of gender, national traditions, and like the Disney song says, it's a small world after all. So the world is actually becoming smaller in the sense of how much we know, how fast we communicate with each other. The size of the planet Earth is no longer the biggest barrier. And so that doesn't come without its challenges. So one example of globalization presenting some challenges is in the example that you read about Barbie, right? And Barbie represents American culture, American dress, American ideals of women, and in other parts of the world, there's hesitancy of accepting American culture because of how it influences traditional culture. So in Iran, to answer to Barbie, they created their own doll for girls there to play with named Sarah. And that was an attempt at fighting the American influence on women. Um, and it became a metaphor for unwanted American ideals. Because the United States was the leader of the capitalist bloc during the Cold War, its culture is a culture that begins to permeate a lot of the world. It has the strongest economy. Um, its media reaches more of the world. And so as a result, when culture began to get globalized, it was American culture that was a large part of that. In Japan, the Mattel Corporation tried to sell their Barbie. It wasn't selling as much because the Japanese children found Barbie to be scary, the way she looked with her teeth smiling, her eyes. And so they adjusted to meet the Japanese sensibilities to make the Barbie seem a little bit more like the dolls that the Japanese girls played with. So companies are also learning they can't just go and take their products to other parts of the world. They also, if they want to make a profit, they need to tread carefully and they need to listen to the consumers of the world. And so those are going to be some of the challenges that come along with globalization. Technology has made us a big consumer of information, of media, of images, and that's influenced cultural interaction. So mass media and now with the internet, we see a lot of the same things throughout the world. We are influenced by music, by products from all over the world, and it's leading to changes in the way society behaves. And one of those is in consumerism. And consumerism is this global culture of consumption, and it begins with the Industrial Revolution as technology was able to produce much more goods at a much faster rate. We began to consume things that we want and not necessarily need because products are cheaper. So our wants continue to grow. Our needs, they're not, we could satisfy our needs very easily, but our wants are limitless because of marketing. We want something, and then the way products are designed nowadays, they're designed with planned obsolescence, which means that they are made to not last. They are made to be outdated so that you want to buy more of it in the future. And that's going to have environmental consequences. And it also impacts our culture. We are a culture of consumption. We consume a whole lot more than we need. And items begin to take on symbolic value. If we don't have the latest this, if we don't have the newest shoe, the latest clothing trend, the newest phone, right? We somehow judge ourselves. And that's actually impacting a lot of people. It impacts a lot of, especially in your generation, there's a lot more desire to be up to date with certain technology or with certain products. And that's based not off what you need, it's based on a culture of consumption. And so on one side, we get to have a lot of things we want, we get to enjoy products, but the downside is it's leading to a lot of unnecessary use of resources that's contributing to a lot of the ecological disasters you're going to read about in the next section. So consumption has become a form of self-expression and identity. And you see this in people's social media oftentimes, what they post or what they post of things either they have or fashion, right? It becomes a form of expressing, having different products, showing different things off. There's YouTubers that focus on, everything new that comes out. So all of this is now part of this new global culture. And sometimes it's called the McDonaldization. Okay, this idea, and it comes from this idea that McDonald's has a certain model where you can make things easily, you can replicate it so that it tastes the same everywhere, so that when you eat it at a McDonald's in New York, it tastes the same as if you ate it at McDonald's in Mexico City, right? Having things that are predictable, right? You predict what people are gonna buy, etc. And so that's become something that's spreading throughout the world. And it's also Americanization, because it's American culture that is leading the way. So the spread of culture that's developed in the United States, including pop culture, is what's beginning to be used everywhere else. So you see this in advertising. Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is the world's most recognized symbol. You can see the cans here with the different languages, but you would know if you were there that this is Coca-Cola. Restaurants like Pizza Hut, Burger King, McDonald's are all over the world. There's even a theory, the McDonald's theory of conflict resolution, that says that two countries that have a McDonald's have never gone to war with each other since having a McDonald's. In other words, when you get a McDonald's, you've joined this global economy, and a war might damage your standing in that economy. So countries tend to tread more lightly when it comes to conflict, tend to look for other resolutions. So it's not necessarily that it's McDonald's, it's the fact that you're participating in this global economy. But this threatens local and indigenous cultures because it introduces a new style of food, this concept of fast food, of wanting something right then and now, sometimes also high sugary content. In other places it hasn't thrived. Taco Bell failed when they try to open up in Mexico City because they try to sell their tacos, which are not really tacos if you've ever eaten Mexican tacos. Nevertheless, in a lot of places they don't like seeing these American fast food chains because it is posing a threat to their local economies, or to their local culture, not their economy, because it's part of their economy. Another part of consumerism is brand name. Brand names encourage people to purchase a product based on that brand, to foster differentiation, right? I'm wearing this, you're wearing that, Nike versus Adidas. That was even one of our spirit days not too long ago. Name brands associate people with status. So you could recognize some of these brands, and when people wear them, you assume they have money, which isn't always the case, especially when there's imitation, clothing that you can find. These labels are very easy to make now with computers that you could print them. But it doesn't necessarily equate with a better quality product. Again, it's still part of this culture of planned obsolescence, right? A lot of the products, clothing is no matter how much you pay for it, it's meant to not last forever. It's meant to break down easily so that you buy another one the next season, right? Fast fashion. And so people sometimes think, oh, well, I'm buying this because it's better quality. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's made in the same factory, in the same material that makes some of the stuff that's sold without the name brand at their local markets for, pennies on the dollar. But what you're paying for is you're paying for, one, all the money these companies spend on advertising, and two, you're spending money on the exclusivity, the status. A few years, I don't know if it's still the case, but the Supreme brand. I mean, how hard is it to make a red sticker that says Supreme and put it on something? But somehow people were paying a lot of money for a shirt with that very simple design that you can easily go to a t-shirt shop here, pay $5 for a really good cotton t-shirt that's going to last a long time, and silk screen it for about another $4. And for $9, you have a Supreme shirt. But people were paying $60, $70 for a t-shirt, right? And it's about status. And so in order to get us to that point, we need to become consumers. We need to be, in a sense, brainwashed into thinking things make us better. So it has psychological effects as well. It makes us think less of ourselves if we don't have some of these goods. It makes us think people are going to judge us, or sometimes it does. It does make people judge you if you don't have something, or people will. I've heard students make fun of other students for having, knockoff Louis Vuitton. Oh, that's not real. You got that, and it's a purse, right? And it holds the exact same thing whether you paid $500 for the purse or whether you paid $40 for the purse, right? And I know not everyone thinks that way, but I would much rather have $500 in a $10 wallet than $10 in a $500 wallet. But but why do people choose the expensive brand? Because they think, or that it brings them status. People will look and be like, wow, you have this. And so in order for us to find that important, we have to have our ego knocked down a little bit. We have to have our self-esteem knocked down a little bit so that we want to buy these products thinking it's going to bring up our self-esteem. That's a whole other, if you're interested in that topic, take peer mediation. We discussed that in that class. So another aspect has been, like I said, the spread of American culture, but there's also now Pan-American culture. Latin America has been infusing American and Latin American cultures together, and it's a form of resistance. A lot of Latin American countries don't like that it's American culture. There's a lot of bad press from the United States in Latin America for a lot of the interventions that happened in the 1900s. And so there's there's acceptance of the culture, but then there's also a little bit of rejection. And your book talked about like the play Evita as an example of like Latin America also producing its own icons that spread throughout Latin America and now are influencing the United States. Part of that is because we have such a big population in the United States of people who either came from Latin America or whose parents or grandparents came from Latin American countries. So we have a big Latino presence in the United States that now even Latin American culture is influencing the United States. Recently, again, because of the internet and the availability of YouTube and now you could communicate all over the world, you see Korean pop also becoming a big influence on American societies and in Latin America as well. So that's another example of globalization of culture. So we live in what is called the age of access, right? Radio, telephone, internet, television, fax machines, those are today's ships and caravans. If you think of the old Silk Roads, right? And the old Indian Ocean trade routes. Access is the new border. Now it's availability of having internet. You can be in a remote part of the world. If you have access to the internet, it changes your whole outlook, your whole world sometimes. Think about things like Airbnb. And now you can take a nice video of your little part of the world, your little, you could have a little cabin in a beautiful location in a part of the world people normally wouldn't have gone to. You can advertise it on the internet. Someone goes there, takes Instagram pictures. Now everyone wants to go there. Even think about here in San Diego, how many people go climb up to Potato Chip Rock or go have a picnic at Kate Sessions Park. And all they do is they post where they're at. And all of a sudden, everyone goes there. Or picking strawberries at the strawberry fields up in Carlsbad, right? Those are things that because of the internet and someone sees it on Instagram, you people want to go do it, right? That was never a thing before Instagram. In fact, before Instagram, you would have told someone, hey, let's go up to Carlsbad to pick strawberries, right? It's like, why? So, but it's funny because instead of, normally these companies pay workers to pick the strawberries, now you're paying them to go pick your own strawberries. It's like genius. That is genius. But access is that new border. And it works positively in a lot of parts of the world. There are women in India who before didn't have their own source of income, who now can, with wireless access that was given to them through a grant, they're able to take wireless printers and digital cameras around the different towns to take pictures of people that people need for IDs, for ID purposes in India. And it's given women the ability to basically have their own business. They start off with a small $100 business loan for the printer and camera. And they are able to go around, and because of wireless technology, they don't need, they don't need to have internet in the town because they have access to wireless hotspots. So they go and they charge very little to take people's passport photos. And before, you used to have to drive hours to the city in order to do that. Now you no longer have to do that. So the technology is becoming that barrier. And we even see it here with distance learning. Those who had a good Wi-Fi were better able to handle their classes using Google Meets. Those of you and students who had difficulties a lot found it a lot harder to stay in class or to keep up with work because your connectivity was your barrier. And then the preeminence of English has come along with globalization. And this is a form of cultural imperialism and electronic media. It's the primary language of global communication. And it's reinforced by the internet, right? www, World Wide Web, right? When you go to Mexico to use the internet, it's www, it's still www, right? It's not an M for mundo, it's the language of the programming of the internet. And the English is then spread. It's China's first new Great Wall is getting past that English. You can see this throughout, here in the Himalayan mountains, you see lettering and writing in English as well as the local languages. And you see this throughout the world on road signs. In large cities, they'll have the signs in their language, but they'll sometimes also have them in English because there's a lot of American or international business people who go to these large cities. English is a lingua franca for business. So in today's world, if you want to do business internationally, you have to learn English. My wife has a cousin who, born and raised in Mexico, met a guy born and raised in Turkey. He spoke no Spanish. She spoke no Turkish. They communicated both with the very little English they have. And to this day, they're married and they speak to each other in English because that's the language they have in common. So the adaptation of technology. So cultures around the world and people around the world have adapted European and US technology for needs while they try to oppose their cultural interference. They've used television as a tool for state building. So state-controlled technology has become a way for countries to now try to control their populations. In some places, you have limited access. For example, in North Korea, they have very limited access to television. It's all controlled by the government, so people only hear the news and the stories the way the government wants them told. And even in countries like ours, we think we have a free society, but really most of our media consumption comes from a few large corporations CBS, Viacom, Disney, NBC are the big conglomerates that control 90% of everything we see on TV, read in magazines, publishing houses, radio shows, um, publishers of music, providers of internet. So even then, technology serves the interest of those who control it. So it is very, in all over the world, how much information we have isn't the only thing. It's who's giving us our information. So in conclusion, globalization has linked culture more than ever before. Communications technology has the power to disrupt indigenous culture, but also has the power of trying to bring the world closer together. And we're still in the process of trying to figure out that balance. So that's it for this section. In the next lecture, you will have sections 2 and 3 together on the impacts of globalization around the world. Thank you, and I'll see you in class.